The comms channel hissed dead static over a huge field of cooling iron. Captain Ren Vass stared at the main war screen. A dented copper coin sat on the battle console, placed carefully next to a steel flask of cold tea. The metal of the ship was too quiet. No lights in the dark, no heat in the metal, no mercy in the math. Vass reached out with a steady hand. He pressed the send button. He had not raised his voice in 14 years. He spoke into the empty radio channel for exactly 12 seconds. He did not ask for a truce. He did not list his dead. You will want to hear how the quietest man in the galaxy won a war in 0.3 seconds. 30 minutes earlier, the bridge of the Hollow Pilgrim smelled of chipped paint and old engine grease. The ship was a standard human cargo hauler. It weighed barely 4,000 tons. It looked like a brick of scrap metal flying through the deep space. Ensign Rios stood at the flight controls. He was 23 years old. His hands shook over the glass board. He did not try to hide his fear. "They are holding at the edge of the system," Rios said. His voice was thin. 14 heavy ships. Vass looked at the copper coin. It was his late wife's lucky piece. She died in the violent border fight 30 years ago. Since that day, Vass had never shouted. He had never raised his voice above a calm murmur. The crew knew his silence was not peace. It was a locked door. He slid the coin across the console edge with his thumb. The metal was smooth on one side. The other side showed a faint mountain range. "Keep the engines cold," Vass said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Shields are at 12%. The tactical officer called out from her station. "Just enough to look like we are trying." Vass nodded slowly. He picked up his steel flask. "Good, let them come." The Kurath hegemony did not ask for permission. They arrived. The massive ring of ships closed around the human hauler like a giant fist. 14 huge ships blocked the distant stars. 28 heavy support ships flanked them. 300 fighter craft spun out of the launch bays, forming a tight net of red laser light. Diplomat Thessaly Ven watched from the cold glass room of the hegemony flagship. She held a clay cup in both hands. The Valith survivor rubbed the rim of the cup with her thumb. It was a nervous habit. She knew the simple truth of the galaxy. The hegemony had not lost a single war in 9,000 years. They demanded total giving up from every species they met. Fleet Primarch Druin Kurath stepped to the flagship's main radio station. He was over 800 years old. His thick hide looked like dried dark blood. 11 thick rings hung from his left jawbone. A heavy 40 Hz hum vibrated through the floor from his air mask. He rested his hand on an old war axe at his hip. "Human vessel," Druin said. The heavy hum bled into the radio feed. "You have crossed into a closed war zone. Cut your main power. Prepare for boarding." On the small hauler, the floor plates rattled. The left thruster whined hard under the heavy gravity pull of the huge ships. "Time to breach," Vass asked. The tactical officer checked her main screen. 12 seconds. From the exact moment they launched the shuttles, Vass touched the copper coin again. The mountain face stamped on the metal caught the dim bridge lights. It looked like a half-closed eye. Humanity had spent 30 years mapping the Kesari dust belt. The belt was a huge graveyard of frozen rocks and heavy iron dust. It was a thick cloud of gray dirt that choked scanners and hid small ships. The galaxy had ignored the belt for 3 centuries. It was useless for mining, but human space scientists had spent decades charting every single rock. They had mapped the exact thickness of the iron dust. They had filed their flight routes without a single complaint. They had paid their trade dues early. They had spoken barely 400 words in the grand meeting rooms. The galaxy thought they were weak. "Slow down to meeting speed," Vass said. Rios swallowed hard. He tapped the flight controls. The hauler slowed. It drifted right into the exact center of the heavy trap. The hegemony ships locked their main red lasers. The bridge of the Hollow Pilgrim bathed in harsh red light. Vass watched the main screen. The Primarch measured all power in fleet size. He measured strength in armor thickness. He could not think of a weapon that was not a huge ship or a sharp blade. Ven pressed her hand against the cold glass of the viewing room. She had seen whole planets burn to gray ash. She looked at the tiny human ship. Something felt wrong. It was too quiet. The hauler was drifting into the exact center of a thick iron cloud. The ship was not failing. It was parking. "They are holding fire," a hegemony officer said from his station. He checked his numbers 3 times. The fight will last exactly 12 seconds. Druun crossed his heavy arms. They have nothing to fire. They are a rock race. They haul dirt and ice so we do not have to. The bridge of the human ship felt like a tomb. It was built for work, not comfort. The air machines hummed with a flat, annoying pitch. The chief engineer was down in the lower decks. He wore the metal dog tags of a brother lost in the old border fight. He kept his hand flat against his chest, feeling the cold tags under his shirt. He kept the engines exactly where the enemy wanted them to be. "Launch the boarding shuttles," Druun ordered. His voice was smug. 12 heavy shuttles dropped from the big ships. They carried over 140 armed soldiers. The shuttles were flying metal boxes. They had thick cutting lasers mounted on the front. They were designed to clamp onto a hull, burn a large hole, and pour armed killers into the gap. They crossed the dark space in a tight, perfect line. 9 seconds to contact, Rios said. His voice cracked. Vass did not blink. He waited. Patience was not just waiting for something to happen. It was building a strong thing that only mattered once. He had spent his whole life waiting for someone to give him exactly 12 seconds. Let them cross the gap, Vass said. Every second felt like an hour. The red lasers painted the human ship. The heat from the beams warmed the outer hull. Inside the bridge, the air grew stale. Sweat rolled down the young boy's neck. Vass watched the sweat drip. He watched the digital clock tick down on the main screen. He did not move. The shuttles chewed through the empty space. 8 seconds. 7 seconds. The chief engineer called up from the lower decks on the inside radio feed. "The core is fully ready," the chief said. "Just say the word." "Hold the line," Vass said. 6 seconds to contact. The heavy shuttles flared their forward-stopping fires. The bright glare washed out the main screen. "Now," Vass said, "the Hollow Pilgrim did not fire a loud gun. It did not launch a hidden bomb. The cargo hauler simply opened itself up. 840 clear glass grid panels unfolded from the outer hull. They slid back like the wide petals of a huge steel flower. The heavy armor stripped away in large pieces. The ship left itself completely naked to the cold space. Druun narrowed his dark eyes. The 40 hertz hum hitched in his thick throat. He looked down at the war screens. The human ship was not bleeding air. It was not giving up. The clear panels were shifting. They locked into exact sharp angles. "They are dead," Druun said. "They just gave up their only shields." But the bright glass panels were not shields. They were a massive lens. The hauler sat perfectly still in the dark. The iron dust of the Kasari belt drifted around the small ship. The natural shape of the dust and the strict angle of the panels matched perfectly. 3 seconds to contact, the tactical officer said. Vass reached for his steel flask. He unscrewed the metal cap. He took a slow, measured sip of cold tea. The dark drink tasted like old copper and time. "Start the system," Vass said. Rio stopped shaking. His hands moved across the glass controls with perfect grace. He locked the final numbers into the main drive. The system armed. The glass house was not a simple weapon. It was a complex math shape. It was a sharp trap hidden in the dark. Rios pushed the final button. A single pulse of bright starlight fed into the glass grid. The 84 panels boosted the light. The iron dust around the ship caught the massive beam. The dust belt itself turned into a closed loop of bouncing, growing force. The pulse did not make a sound. It moved faster than human thought. The hot light hit the first piece of iron dust, bounced to the next piece, and grew. The huge ring of ships became a giant oven. The violent heat trapped inside had nowhere to go but through the hegemony hulls. It took 0.3 seconds. The heavy shuttles turned to white ash. The 28 support ships melted into hot slag. The 14 huge ships cracked open like rotten fruit. The flagship was the first ship to break. Its 12,000 layers of stolen armor shattered like thin ice. The long, bloody winning streak of the Korath hegemony ended in a blinding, completely silent flash. They burned, they broke, they died. The harsh light faded into the dark. The Hollow Pilgrim sat untouched in the exact center of an empty dust field. Vass set his steel flask down on the main console. He picked up the copper coin. He stared at the huge field of cooling iron. He reached out with a steady hand. He pressed the send button. 12 seconds, Vass said into the dead radio channel. You counted well. He closed the channel. Deep in the floating trash, a single hegemony warning beacon clicked on, flashing a weak red light into the dark. Diplomat Ven sat in a small Valith rescue craft 6 hours later. She held her clay cup with both hands. She looked out at the floating metal and the quiet stars. The humans had not built a dirty bomb. They had built a pure math problem. The hegemony had provided the exact numbers needed to solve it. The hegemony spent 18 long months looking into the total loss of their unbeatable fleet. Their top scientists sifted through the cold dust. They found the strange math. They found the human records hidden over 30 years. They found the truth about the other ships. The Hollow Pilgrim was the 14th ship to carry the deadly parts. The other 13 ships had flown their routes, made their simple drops, and never turned on what they carried inside. They had just waited. The hegemony found all of this data. They did not find a single way to stop the next one. 47 years later, the short war was a faded memory. The proud hegemony never crossed the border again. The bridge of the Hollow Pilgrim sat in a human history building. The command chair was empty. The lights were dim and soft. A dented copper coin rested on the seat pad. The metal was still warm from the display lamps. The hegemony surrender radio channel crackled on the wall speaker. No one answered the call. There will be no surrender. There will be no treaty. There will be no sound. The coin caught the soft light. The mountain face looked like a smile.